Before we kick off, though, I would like to begin by acknowledging the Ngunnawal and Ngambri peoples, who are the traditional owners of the land from which I'm joining today. Um, and I'd like to pay my respects to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are part of the TASA community. Um, Indigenous people have cared for and nurtured this land for thousands of years, and their wisdom, resilience, and understanding of the world continue to enrich the way that we engage with our environment and each other. And I, for one, am really grateful for that ongoing custodianship, which allows me to enjoy the beautiful lands and rivers and grasslands around Canberra, which I love so very much to go walking through. I also just want to say, like, in the context of sociology, I think it's really important to recognize, that as we continue to explore and understand the world around us, it's so important to center Indigenous voices and perspectives. And Indigenizing sociology is a really essential part of this process, and something that I'm been really thrilled to see TASA kind of leading on from my role in the executive committee. So I would welcome anyone else to post in the chat today where you are joining from. But yes, so I'm Molly Saunders, and I'm the TASA Postgrad Portfolio Leader for this year and next year. And I'm going to be facilitating our webinar today. And it's my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker, Hannah, who is a PhD candidate at Monash University, specifically the Monash Gender and Family Violence Prevention Centre. And last year, Hannah was the very well-deserved winner of the TASA Postgraduate Impact and Engagement Award. And I'm very excited to hear her speak today about her incredible contributions through her work and also her experience of applying for the award and winning the award. So Hannah's PhD focuses on young women's experiences of online and technology-facilitated dating abuse. And I think, Hannah, correct me if I'm wrong, but you specifically look at how young women manage these interactions and the way that these experiences change how young women engage with online spaces. So Hannah, we're very grateful to have you here today. Thank you so much for joining us. So today's session is not just an opportunity to hear about the amazing work being done by Hannah, but it's also a chance, I guess, for us to reflect more broadly on how we can all engage with and support initiatives that make a meaningful difference in our community. And I'm really looking forward to having that conversation. And I hope this webinar provides sort of some new insights and inspiration for everyone, whether you're watching it in person with us right now or whether you're coming back and watching it online. So the format of today's webinar is hopefully going to be quite relaxed and conversational. There's just a small number of us here, so hopefully, we can have a kind of dynamic conversation. I'll start with a brief overview of the award, what it is and how it came to be. And then I've got some conversations for Hannah, which kind of cover things such as the value of sociology, but also more specifically her personal experiences with the award and the work that she's done, as well as, any tips for potential applicants. And then, at the end, we will have a short question time. But as I said, it's really meant to be a relaxed conversational style. So please raise your hand or drop questions in the chat throughout the session if anything arises for you. Okay, so in terms of the Postgraduate Impact and Engagement Award, what is it? It's essentially an annual recognition that celebrates the outstanding contributions of postgraduate students to Australian society. And the award, while there's plenty of awards available to students upon completion of their PhDs, this award was specifically introduced as kind of an acknowledgement that there are no awards for PhD students during their candidature. And so it was introduced in 2019 as an initiative of the postgraduate subcommittee that at the time was headed by Ben Lohmeyer. And it's a part of the suite of awards that are announced at the TASA conference each year, which also include, early career researcher awards, teaching awards, and the sort of best publication award. So the key idea behind the Postgraduate Impact and Engagement Award is to really recognise and encourage contributions that extend beyond those traditional academic outputs, so things like publications and citation metrics. And it's really designed to acknowledge broader impacts in areas like teaching, community work, and other means of social change. So something, that we'll hear from Hannah today is how that impact in the community was central to her own work, and really a key part of the reason that she won the award last year. The award is based on the Boyer model of scholarship, which highlights the four values. And these values are the scholarship of discovery, scholarship of integration, scholarship of application, and scholarship of teaching. And you can read more about those elements on the TASA postgraduate website, but we'll also talk more about them today. And using this model was a really conscious choice by the postgraduate subcommittee at the time, because they really wanted to kind of push beyond that publish or perish mentality that often exists in academia. The subcommittee recognized that PhD students are under all of these pressures from so many different avenues, about things that are essentially, often quite niche to academia. And they wanted to kind of create an award that values the broader real world contributions that students make throughout the PhD process. And that kind of general approach to academia is something that I really appreciate about TASA, and it was definitely one of the reasons that I got involved with the association. And just as an aside, I think you can see that focus in TASA's conference theme for the year, which is Sociology in Action, Wellbeing, Policy and Activism in Times of Crisis and Change. So I would encourage all of you to, engage with the conference at the end of the year if you're able to. There are postgraduate bursaries that are available online for you to apply for. But in terms of that focus on the real world impact of our work, that's what this award really seeks to celebrate. And so I think it's fantastic that we have Hannah here as last year's award winner. Because although I wasn't on the judging panel for her, I have had the opportunity to read her application, and it's clear that Hannah made an absolutely remarkable impact in raising awareness of digital dating abuse. Her work contributed significantly to the understanding of this issue, and I'm sure she'll be able to speak more about that today. But before we dive into those sort of specifics of her application and the work that she does, I'd like to begin with a broader question for you, Hannah. And that is sort of how or why do you think sociology is relevant to creating social impact and contributing value to society more broadly?
Yeah, I mean, that's an enormous question.
It's such a big question.
I think it's so important and valuable. It's something that I definitely something that my primary supervisor has always been really important to her. So she's been talking about it all the way through my candidature. So it's been on my mind. But yeah, I just think that sociology does this thing where we're critiquing and reevaluating the systems and functions of how we go about our lives. And that's the only way to make proper changes is by first doing that. And so I just think it's, incredibly valuable. But then also I don't know if it's just me, but I feel like there's also this responsibility then to make sure that that information is getting directly to the people that can use it. And that's, I guess, where this research impact and engagement thing comes in then.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I would absolutely agree. Sociology is a really valuable lens through which we can kind of critique those, whether it be social issues or power inequities, like systemic forms of marginalization. And then I definitely also feel kind of that responsibility of then, well, what do you do with that information? It's there's definitely an argument to be made for the creation of knowledge in and of itself. But for me, I also definitely feel that responsibility of, well, how are we going to use this research for good? Because that's why, I mean, I don't know, for me, I don't know if this is for you, but like that's why I engage in the research in the first place. Like it's almost, the reason, what, I don't know, raison d'etre, is that the phrase? Like,
yeah.
yeah.
I think like it can get tricky though if you think about that just being the reason, because I also think like making like conceptual contributions is important too, because that's like an end goal of impacting society, but it's like just we're bolstering ideas and stuff. But and the other thing I wanted to say on this was that I think it like we're so lucky that like people are so like deeply interested in so many different areas of sociology, because like I would not want to be deeply researching some of the topics people are looking at, but I'm like, thank God someone's doing that.
Yeah.
So I think that's so good too.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think that, yeah, viewing like the different thematic groups that TASA has, you just like, I'm glad someone else, I'll focus on my patch, you focus on yours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially like working in like the domestic family violence space. Like every second comment to hearing about that is they're like, oh, thank God, like that you're working on that. I couldn't do it. But then I feel like that about other people's topics too. So
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a good kind of segue. Like, can you tell us some more about the work that you do, and and your experience of winning the award and what that meant for you and your work generally?
yeah. Yeah, so my work is looking at digital dating abuse. I sort of intersect youth studies, technology, and like domestic family violence. And then so like I sort of my PhD is in criminology, but like it's also sociology, obviously. But so there's like sort of this thing in like the domestic family violence space of research where it's like we need to make changes now because it's so urgent. So yeah, this like research impacting and engagement thing has been floating around through my whole PhD, but also that I didn't really identify as exactly that. And so yeah, like I mean we'll talk later about like the strategy for like coming to terms with that, like working all that out. But yeah, so I guess the experience of winning the award. I mean, it was really like solidifying and grounding and really just like you're doing the right thing. That kind of thing was like just something so unique. As like you were saying, how there's no other postgraduate awards. It's like rare to also for postgraduate awards to be included in like fully academic spaces and not just in postgraduate spaces alone as well. So that was really cool, like receiving the award, you're at the award ceremony with all the other academics and ECRs and stuff getting their awards, and then you're the little postgraduate that gets to get one too. But yeah, and then yeah, so I guess there's that part of it, and also like you then get financial support to attend the conference too, which is also like so amazing to get, especially like coming towards the end of your PhD. Funding has run out. So yeah, that's really helpful too.
Yeah, nice. That's really nice to hear that it was valuable how it kind of incorporated uh you into all of the other awards. Like I think the post-grad experience in many ways can be very lonely and isolating. And I think there's a lot more awareness of that nowadays. But you're not quite, you're not quite an academic, but you're not an academic either. And so kind of being able to be included in that community more broadly is really nice. Something, this is an aside, I guess, but something that we're looking at this year and trialing for the first time at the conference is actually, instead of having like a post-grad day on the first day before the conference, we're looking to have different post-grad events scattered throughout the conference so that people still have an opportunity to meet their peers and to kind of have those potentially safer spaces of engaging, more comfortable spaces of engaging with people at similar stages of them, but they're also kind of not singled out as separate to everyone else. So yeah, we'll see how that goes. People might hate it, and we might go back to the post-grad day, but I think, yeah, that was something that I was kind of hoping to do in that sense, was make it so that postgrads are less of like this unique, very, very kind of separated cohort compared to other academics.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in terms of like, you've said a few times now that the impact and engagement was something that your supervisor's been very sort of proactive about. Um, did that mean that in your work, like, did you design your impact and engagement strategy from the start? If so, like, can you tell us how? And if not, like, what did you do and how would you do it differently?
Yeah, I would say my supervisor's interest in research impact and engagement is across her own research. I was sort of just like observing it, sort of thing, less about like we sat down and strategically planned things out. But I like thinking about this idea of like how to strategize. To say first up, I didn't strategize. I was just like, oh, this is what I've been doing. Okay.
Yeah.
What happened. But like breaking it down, it sort of looked like it came about in two different ways. So there's like the research impact engagement that was taking up opportunities that were already being offered to me and embedding my research into them to get the message out into that opportunity that was just there. And then the other one is creating opportunities with like the purpose of getting the research to a specific group. And I sort of engaged in both. The first was that it was just opportunities that I was like, oh, I could also just talk about my research here as well. And then I was like, oh, actually, I want to be more focused and practical about where I'm sharing this too. So it's sort of a mix of both. And I think like a key thing to that working, because again, I wasn't really sure what I was doing. I would have been more strategic if I had known. But it was like keeping a note of all the things I was doing. And just then I was able to look back at it all and be like, oh, okay, this is what's been happening. Yeah, so did you want me to talk about like examples of what I did?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, so just so I engaged in like a few different types of things. The ones where there was like an opportunity that came about and I was able to I was like, oh, here's an opportunity to embed some of the things that I've been finding. There was the South Australia Police needed someone to create some training for their domestic violence prevention program about digital dating abuse. And so, got involved in that. But so they gave me a list of like learning outcomes for that, what they wanted it to be like. And I was like, there are gaps here. Things that I would like you to know. And I was also like, what would my young women participants want you to know about digital dating abuse? So I, ticked off all the things that they wanted. And then I also just got all of my stuff in there too. And yeah, so that was sort of that one. And then another way that they're sort of taking up an opportunity was my supervisor and I submitted a contribution to like the government did a review of the Online Safety Act, and so they were taking submissions for that. We created one together, and I got a lot of my research in there too, because it's all stuff that's like happening now. So like we want you to know now, and like you're asking about this, so here we go. And it meant also it didn't have to be published yet because it's not. I don't have pubs for my PhD yet. So that was really cool. And then from that, we got invited to speak at a roundtable event they had of that. I was the only postgraduate there. It was very intimidating, but it was also cool to be like, oh, this question they're asking, I have direct research from that. So I was able to just be like, this is what young women are experiencing right now. And yeah, so that was another way of like an opportunity that came that I embedded my research into. From there though, I was like, okay, if I wanted to be strategic, who do I want, who needs to know these things on the ground? And, you know, in the domestic family violence space, that's practitioners primarily. And so I looked around for some practitioner conferences and ended up talking on a panel about tech abuse and digital dating abuse in that space. So that's like non-academic. It was very like, yeah, lots of like people working on the ground. So you've got to like tailor your research for that kind of audience, which was really cool to do. And the other one was also focused on practitioners. I created a research brief about digital dating abuse, which is just like all the basic details and really accessible information. They could just grab it and quickly understand what was happening now with digital dating abuse.
Yeah. Amazing. I mean, that was really interesting. I want to throw it to anyone in the audience. Like, does anyone have any particular questions for Hannah there about what she did or what her work was or how she went about translating her research into accessible language? Yeah, Sunim?
Thanks so much, Hannah. I think it's a really, really interesting topic. And it segues a little bit into mine in the sense that I'm doing Gen Z Y, worldviews, values, etc. So, of course, social media in a grand sense figures in that. But I'm just interested to know what sparked that topic for you. What
Yeah.
does that come out of a professional orientation or?
No, deeply personal. No, like I did, my master's was in dating violence, and I tried to do, you know, digital dating abuse and dating violence because I think that, you know, they're both so entwined, but there wasn't a big enough thesis space to be able to do both. So I was like, okay, I want this to be my PhD then, and then yeah, off that up. But I also have personal experience with both, so that was
Wow.
part of the driving force.
Was your original frame within the family violence field, or so your background is criminology?
My background is sociology. I've never been in criminology, and it is weird being, because you're like, oh, they're very similar. You know, criminology is a subset of sociology or something like that is how I understand it, but they're quite different. As in like very like policy and criminal justice system and prevention, intervention, everything has to have like a direct impact to something else, which I was just like, oh, let's ask questions. What can we understand more about this? But it sort of meant that I'll do that, like, let's ask questions and find out things, and then we're like, okay, we've got to channel this into like something a bit more practical, but which I think it's been really great and might be not something that's across all of sociology as well, but yeah.
Wonderful. And I just want to ask about your basically your methodology, your data collection. What form did that take?
Yeah, I did interviews with young women, like over the phone and over Zoom. But I also used I adapted the scroll back interview method, which is basically an interview method where they like hold their phone during the interview and they look back through like content on social media and message banks and talk to you about what they're seeing. So I adapted it to be a bit more trauma informed because it was not originally designed for like dealing with victim survivors. So interviews with a bit of that. Yeah.
Wonderful. And can I ask you, did you interview only within within a cohort that had some some police intervention?
No, definitely not. There would be no cohort then.
No.
Yeah, none of them had thought. I mean, maybe one.
Okay, so I just wondered because I think you were, I don't know, something made me think that you were perhaps doing it within that frame of people who had, made complaints or whatever.
I could definitely think of a project to do like following this one in that space. But like this one didn't specifically.
No, I was just interested to know whether you had done both and what you found in but yeah, no, so it was much broader. Okay.
Yeah. To be researched.
And how did you find the interviews? I mean, overall, like what comments would you make about?
I love talking to young women. It's so great just being like, tell me everything, and they just go for it. It's yeah, I really enjoyed them. There was definitely a weird thing of like going from insider to outsider in the interviews. That happened quite a bit because I'm like 34, so I'm outside of their age group. I was interviewing 18 to 25. But you know, I could sort of also like blend in and have those experiences too. So we'd be chatting and they're like, oh, that's when I was dating Brett. And I'm like, okay, tell me about Brett. What did he do? But then also they'd mention an app and I was like, does Instagram do that? And they were like, ooh, outsider doesn't know the features of Instagram in this intimate way that I do. So yeah, that was really interesting. And then there's also the range of like the distance they'd had from those negative experiences was really showed in like how upset they got during the interview, how it was affecting them, how you know, reflecting on something really recent was much more yeah, you could tell they were more affected than something that had happened a lot further back in the past. So there's also that spectrum of stuff. But, yeah.
And
So
what sort of safety, sorry, someone
no,
else?
you go. That's right.
I just wanted to ask, what sort of safety measures did you put around those engagements?
So just like split them into safety for them and safety for me. And yeah, like there's lots involved in like the designing of and setting up of things and all the tech safety, and then also like the, you know, well-being during the interview and that sort of thing, which I probably shouldn't go into detail here. But
it is a very vulnerable group.
Yeah,
particularly vulnerable.
Yeah, I think the thing is working in that like trauma-informed like feminist framework where it's very much about agency, like you're just inviting them to engage with any part of the interview, any part of the questioning, and they can opt in, opt out. They're very much like can take or leave whatever they want, getting them to share their story how they want to. I wasn't doing a lot of interrupting or like not too much directing and that sort of things, all those sort of trauma-informed interview stuff.
I love your enthusiasm for. I mean, I'm actually 73, so I'm way out of there. The Gens YZ groups, you know, kind
It
of
seem like
a
little
generation
babies every now and then.
but they were amazing. You know, I was just so engaged, and they were very engaged, which I found very interesting, given the generational differences. But yeah. So I'm a Gens YZ, you know, supporter now.
Yeah.
So like in terms of, I really like what you said before, Hannah, about how you said that like when you were contributing to the submissions and stuff like that, you don't have any publications yet, so you were still able to draw on your research in making an impact engagement without those like traditional academic outputs. And that, I think that was something that kind of resonated with me because I've had a similar thing where I went to put in a submission. My research is on the NDIS, but I was kind of unsure about how to navigate that process of like, well, these are not published results. And I guess I'm kind of wanting to know, like, what was that process like for you when you first started going out into those like non-academic outputs, and into those different ways of engaging with the community and government and even the police? Like, sorry, I know this was not one of the pre-prepared questions that I gave you, but
yeah. I get what you mean, because like in academia, it's very like everything is peer reviewed and everything is backed up, and you can't just say things without it being like official. Yeah, so it's definitely a weird space, but I think that's that thing of like learning to like translate your research into different spaces, that isn't really that useful in those spaces to just like be spurting out. So I think it was like the blend of it. So you say this particular part of the problem is backed by research, and also in my current research that I've been looking at as in this PhD project, I found these emerging findings that really important. So like blending it together, because I think it also, because you then start talking about it as your experience as the researcher. This is what I've just found. It's more like like a personal story, a narrative. It's less like academic language, I guess. I think that's what made it work.
No, that absolutely makes sense. so I mean, yeah, I guess that for me is really useful information to hear. But what kind of other advice do you have in terms of like other postgrads out there that might be thinking about wanting to do impact engagement but not really knowing how to start or how to go about it?
Yeah. Well, I first wanted to make it very clear that it doesn't like, just because I've definitely dealt with like the comparison thing throughout my whole PhD, and it's just like it works really well for some people's projects, and it's not really something that's like pressing for other projects, and that's totally fine. There's also like lots of different creative ways that you can do like this sort of engagement stuff. That like, yeah, there's a lot that you can do. I had some examples of like, I listened to like PhD podcasts and stuff all the time. One of them was talking about during his PhD, in science, he'd engaged in this in England, he'd engaged in this Pints for Science because he wanted to get his research out there. And so it's just this program where they would go around to pubs on the weekend, and they'd give little science talks. So it was like translating research. So it's like the Pints sort of thing of science, and just like getting the research out into the community, really, making it translated into functioning in that space was super cool. And then also like the winner from the previous year that Ellen, who I went to this webinar to ask questions of, hers was that she got together with some graphic designers, and they created some short videos about the experience of migrant women's experiences of domestic family violence moving through the systems we have here, which then she put on a website and is like freely accessible to practitioners and people with those experiences. So there's like lots of different kinds of things you can do. I also have some plans for more that I would like to do, which I thought could be useful to mention too.
Yeah, I'd love to hear.
Yeah, like the impact so far has been very like government, police, practitioners, but I would really like to create some like podcasts or some like social media collective post things, some TikTok reels, whatever, that translate this information to young women directly in the spaces where like the social media spaces where it's this kind of unsafety is happening too. It could be really cool. So but that's something that I have wanted to do from the start, sort of thing, but I haven't been ready yet. So like I was saying, there's not like one time you should engage in this sort of stuff. I wasn't ready yet. I'll probably, when I finish the PhD, then I'll start doing something like that.
Yeah, like those ideas can kind of percolate in your mind, and it's like you might not be ready or you might not have the time right now, but
yeah. But yeah, then so advice I would say as well is, so don't compare yourself to anybody else, but also just like take notes of what you are doing, like keep a record of the things you are, because like individually these things didn't seem like research impact and engagement to me, but when I put them all together, I was like, oh, this is engaging with government and police and that sort of thing. So that can be really helpful too.
Yeah, I think that's really nice. I think that's also just a really nice way of kind of celebrating like the work that you do just even internally, like it's so easy to just within PhD, as I already said, like there's so many things that are expected of you and so much to do all of the time often, but to kind of have a little record of like actually like these are all the things I do and they're worth noting. And it kind of also in terms of like that broader conversation of social impact and engagement, like and specifically, within this award, like you might not feel like, oh, something that I did wasn't actually very big, but these are all small actions that we can kind of all take in different ways through different creative means, and collectively, like they actually can add up to something, even if they don't feel very impactful at the time. Which is a really nice kind of way of thinking about social change more broadly as well, I think. Yeah. I mean, so then I'm just looking at the clock. I think it would be really helpful for you now to kind of tell us specifically, you've told us about like these are the things you did with the police and stuff. If you could actually take us through your application itself and kind of, because I know like I have obviously seen your application and the evidence that you've provided is fantastic. Like you really kind of have you give this fantastic, you tell this fantastic narrative about the work that you've done and you provide the evidence to back it up. So if you could kind of take us through what that application looked like, that would probably be really helpful for people who are thinking of applying.
Yeah, definitely. I think the evidence part of the application was really confusing and
Yeah.
to try and work out. But yeah, so I would be happy to. I'm going to share my screen a bit. So
Yeah, great.
yeah. Excellent. So everyone can see that.
It's not showing your Word doc. Oh, there we go. Yeah.
Yep. So it says that, yeah, so this is my like letter that is your 500-word letter that you're supposed to provide. Yeah, which I just connected to the Boyer model of what they were asking for, which is the discovery, integration, application, and teaching.
So just for everyone, I'll talk about that after we've like finished this. I'll go through like what the actual specific criteria is, but scholarship of discovery and integration are two parts of it.
Yeah. Perfect. So and then sort of like did basic dot points of the things that I'd done, so it was really clear for everybody judging. And then this was a separate document of my evidence, which I just organized into that. And then so I'll just scroll through them. So then I had like a letter from my supervisor. I had a letter from the police who I worked with, which at the time she was like, we can't pay you for this work, but we can provide you with a letter of recognition. And I was like, that's okay. And then my supervisor's like, no, ask for it. You'll need it. Here we are. We needed it. So always take the letters. They will any evidence is great. And then there's like the like a copy of the training that I presented. And then there was a link to the like a YouTube version of the panel discussion for the practitioner conference. And then this is our submission to the Statutory Review of Law and Safety Act. Include that there, and then the research brief as well. So I just included the documents of things or the links to things, anything that would like prove that happened, I guess.
Amazing. No, that's really helpful, because I think you say the evidence thing was really confusing. What did you find confusing about it?
I guess because you're like, what is enough? Proves enough. I did ask the Online Safety Review Act people if I could get a letter from them, and they like didn't reply, which I was like, they're probably not going to, but like, how do I provide this evidence for this? So
and I think I'll talk about this in terms of the selection criteria, but community engagement and impact is notoriously difficult to measure, right? Like even in like, policy advocacy, how do we measure those things? Often we're just one part of the puzzle. Like, do we know if our submission has actually made a difference? All of those kinds of things.
So I'm to spiral about that. I'm like, the police could have just chucked it out and not used it, but like,
but so I think that's a really important point to raise. Like, if you wrote a submission, that's valuable in and of itself as a form of impact and engagement. And so just provide your submission. Like, you don't, for the purposes of the award, like, we don't need to see that your submission led specifically to like new legislation being drafted, like that's not really realistic. And so we kind of just want to see your applicants attempts to engage and attempts to kind of use their research in ways that are kind of positively trying to impact society. So I think that's a really important point to raise. So before I move on to like talking through the selection criteria, we've got about, I guess, like 10 minutes left, so I'll move through that quickly. But I just wanted to turn over, Hannah, like, is there anything else that you wanted to say quickly before I take us through that detail quickly?
Just with the evidence thing, I think my supervisor provided a really great letter tying it all together. So like my evidence felt patchy, but then with a letter included, it's sort of like she tied all of the things and connected it and used her supervisor language that wasn't like, it was maybe okay. She was just like, it was really good. I feel like that really like helped. So getting one.
Yeah. Yeah. Supervisors are so good at that.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, no, fantastic. All right, cool. So I'll just quickly run us through the selection criteria, and then we'll open it up again to the floor for questions, and then we'll probably wrap it up for the afternoon. So there is eligibility criteria, which is available on the TASA website. It's quite straightforward eligibility criteria. You have to be enrolled in an honours, master's, or PhD program. You can have graduated from your postgrad program this year, so in 2025. So say like you graduated in March, you can still apply for the award, but you just have to note that the activities that were kind of assessing you for the award on, they had to have been undertaken in your actual PhD or actual master's. You also have to be a member of TASA, and you cannot be a previous recipient of the award. So, Hannah, you cannot apply again. In terms of the selection criteria, which I imagine is probably most of interest to people wanting to apply, there are 3 different parts. The first part, which we've already talked about significantly today, is that evidence of impact and engagement. And that's what we use that Boyer model of scholarship for. So as we saw with Hannah, she had evidence of scholarship of integration and what was the other one? Sorry, I can't remember. Discovery. Yeah, discovery and integration.
Teaching. Yeah.
Yeah. And so because I guess that's probably a framework that a lot of people are unfamiliar with, I wanted to just run through that really quickly now. So, and I guess also at the outset, we're not looking for evidence in all 4 of these models. One of these 4 elements is enough to apply for the award and to win the award. And I think that is really important to acknowledge, because as I take you through, I appreciate it might sound a bit overwhelming. So scholarship of discovery, in that sense, you would need to evidence your commitment to building knowledge for its own sake. And so this might be thinking about academic outputs, but it's obviously not the only way to contribute to knowledge. Like you may also be contributing to sort of like intellectual discussions, seminars, things like that at your university in other ways. So the academic community, things like that. The scholarship of integration is about showing how you've made connections across disciplines or placed your knowledge in a larger context, exploring sort of data in a new, revealing, novel way. And I think, like what Hannah really exemplified in her work was how she educated non-specialists like government agencies and the police. And so she integrated her knowledge by making connections across those community cohorts. Their scholarship of application is about showing that the knowledge you've developed in your PhD is being applied to help a social problem. So I think that's kind of quite self-explanatory. And then the last, but obviously not least, is scholarship of teaching. So showing that you have contributed to the education of community or students, future scholars, those kinds of things. And obviously there are 1,000,001 ways to be able to do that. So they are the 4 areas in which we would be looking for evidence of impact and engagement. But as I said, not all 4. Like if you've contributed to an excellent teaching community at the place where you're doing your PhD, like that's what we want to know about, The second element that second criteria for the award is that your work is of relevance to Australian society or sociology. Again, I think that's kind of self-explanatory. That's showing, that your work is relevant to sociological research broadly or to society. So Hannah spoke about how her research was really relevant to sociology because it addressed a knowledge deficit in our approach to an understanding of digital dating abuse. And she also spoke about how she built sort of this more intersectional and nuanced understanding of digital abuse in Australian society. So I think you kind of often have to cover that in framing your PhD anyway, but we kind of just want to understand how it works in relation to your project. And then the third criteria is to do with evidence of change in your target audience. And as we said, that's a really tricky thing to show. So I would encourage you, like really, really encourage you to put in for the application, even if you think your evidence of impact is not particularly clear. Like Hannah, you've spoken today about how you felt like your evidence was patchy. And, you know, for me as someone who's looking at your application, it doesn't come across as patchy at all. Evidence of impact, change in audience, like those are, as I said, notoriously difficult things to manage. And so we just want to know what attempts have you made to engage with your target audience, whether that's scholars in your production of knowledge and scholarship of discovery, or whether that's, you know, police in your scholarship of integration. Yeah, so they're the three criteria. That's kind of like a very quick introduction into that Boyer scholarship model, just for to help people's understanding of how to write their application. Hannah, you've provided some really, really good insight today. It's been so interesting to hear about your work. Before we finish up, we have about 5 to 10 minutes left. I want to open it back up to the floor. Any questions for Hannah, for me, about the award, about, you know, Hannah's work more broadly?
If no one else is.
Yeah, go for it.
Molly, I just wanted to ask you something actually about
Sure.
as a judge of those applications. So, you know, it's been discussed that Hannah hadn't published, and so evidence was something that I understood Hannah saying was a little bit, she felt a little bit unclear or uncertain about that. So how does, I mean, I think with Hannah too, the other thing, of course, was that she had engagement in a direct community sense. So there was evidence, very definite evidence in that regard. But for someone who's not, you know, who isn't in that sort of criteria, so you're just kind of working away at your PhD, and there aren't that many opportunities apart from the engagement you have in your data collection activities. How do you find evidence in that application, in such an application, or how do you look for it?
So you're asking me if the primary activity is the PhD in and of itself?
Yes.
So I think there I would be looking for how they're, I mean, again, it's so contextual, right? Because it would really depend on what the PhD was about. You know, if the PhD is very theoretical and purely you know, doesn't involve any qualitative data or something like that, then I'd be thinking, well, that seems to be something about the scholarship of discovery. You know, about the creation of knowledge for the sake of knowledge. So it would be about how the applicant framed it in terms of that. If the PhD was like a co-designed PhD, for example, that incorporated young people with lived experience of whatever the research was about, then I'd be thinking, well, maybe that's the scholarship of integration. You know, you're thinking about making connections and placing the research in kind of its larger context. Maybe there's also some kind of discovery there as well, in that you're probably, you know, making co-design methodological findings, and maybe even kind of you're contributing to the education of your co-researchers if you've trained them in the research process, you know. So I think it would be really, like, it's always going to be really specific to the project itself. Like, I'm not sure I could say specifically PhDs in general, what's their contribution in terms of this model, but I think it would be thinking about what your PhD does and how your PhD fits within those four elements of Boyer's model.
So a contribution is a major thing in all of those areas, really, in some way.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, definitely. Yeah. No worries.
I was thinking for evidence.
Yeah.
Like another good thing could be to ask for feedback, like student feedback on your teaching, to provide that evidence, that sort of thing. I also had some participants give me feedback on my interviews.
Yeah.
But like that could have been another form of evidence, perhaps.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they're both very good examples. Yeah. Any other questions? No?
Have
All right.
Have you done any engagement with research impact engagement on your
Me?
over your candidate?
You know what? I think I haven't really thought about it about what I've done before I started thinking about this award. But then thinking through this award, I think I have done a few things, but as you said, it definitely wasn't strategic. There was no grand plan for it. So I've contributed to some submissions based off my research, as I said. I also not in my PhD, but I also work part-time as a research associate, and I was thinking in that we've done things like set up a disability research network, and I've written so my PhD is about the NDIS, and I've written a paper on, not a paper, it was like a commissioned kind of discussion paper on the NDIS quality and safeguards system.
That's what I mean,
so,
though, where you're like, well, I can't do anything, and just like jot it all down and then be like, oh, perhaps this is a reason.
Yeah, exactly. So because I thought like this is just, I look at this award and I'm like, I would never apply for an award like this. I've done nothing. you know. But then like talking to you, you're like, oh no, maybe there are some things that I've done. So I think that's why I really liked your idea of like writing it down. But as you said as well, like that you've got some ideas like percolating. I definitely have things that I would really like to do with my PhD, and different ways that I'd really like to engage with different mostly kind of community organizations and stuff, and like fun, because again I work with women with disability in my research, like creative, accessible ways of distributing the research findings and things like that. I think it's this element of thinking about how to mobilize your research kind of brings in a new level of creativity, which I think is kind of really fun. Yeah. Alrighty. Well, on that note, the hour's very nearly up, so we might wrap it up there. I want to give another massive thank you to you, Hannah, for joining us today and sharing your experience. And thank you as well to our engaged audience for all of your questions. This recording will be uploaded online, so you can come back and get all of the tips and insights on your application. As I said, I really encourage you to put in your applications. And thank you so much for coming.
Thanks, Molly.